Hey everyone, welcome to the third episode of FTC Java Shorts. My name is Hunter Cooperman, and I'm one of the programmers on the Penguineers. And today we're going to be talking about methods that return values. So, a method can return anything from an integer to a boolean to a string, or even stuff like an array or a DC motor. So when you're returning a value with a method, after the modifiers but before the method name in the curly brackets, you're just going to put the type of value that the method is returning. So if I'm returning an integer, for example, I would just put int right here. You always have to specify the return type of a method. So if you make a method that doesn't return anything, then you use the word void. And that just says that, I'm going to make a method that doesn't return a particular type of value. And when you actually want to return the value, somewhere in the body of the method, you just put the word return, the value you want to return, and then a semicolon. And it's important to note that this return statement right here will automatically end the method no matter where it is in the body. So if you have like an if statement or something that could potentially return a value, then if it ends up following the path where it does return the value, then that'll stop the method immediately. And so what this return statement does is, let's say I have some sort of method called like my method, it'll actually make my method equal to that value. So I could say like int res for results equals, and then the name of the method, and then parentheses and semicolon. And if this method returns an integer, then this variable that I just created would actually become the integer that the method returns. So let's go ahead and just write a really quick method. Alrighty, so here I have a pretty basic autonomous, and let's think of a situation where it might be useful to have a method that returns a value. One thing that jumps to mind for me is if I have like a color sensor or something like that in autonomous, I need to convert the raw numerical data into something useful, like maybe a string that has the name of the color that it's sensing, like red, blue, gray, something like that. And if I'm making multiple readings in autonomous, it starts to become cluttered if I keep repeating all the logic and the if statements that I need to convert the numerical data into useful data. So what I can do is I can make a method that gets the color sensor readings, does all the logic in the method, and then returns the more useful information that I have. That way I'm not repeating all of that code every single time I want to make a color sensor reading. Now the test robot that I have over there, it actually doesn't have any sensors on it, but what we can do is, just to make an example, we can just create a method and have a completely randomly generated value, and we'll convert that random value into something more useful, like a name of a color. Alrighty, so let's go ahead and create our method. We're going to use public for the modifiers, and then we're going to be returning a string, which would be like a word. And then let's give our method a useful name. I'll call it getColor because we're going to be pretending like it's a color sensor value. So the first thing we need to do is we need to create a string to represent the result that we're getting. So like the resulting colors like blue, red, green, something like that. And I'll just set it equal to an empty string. And then next we need to generate some sort of fake color sensor reading. So I'll create a double and I'll call it reading. And then what I can do is I can generate a random value. So this method right here, math.random, is actually included as part of the Java package. And what it will do is it'll generate a semi-random value between 0 and 1. So I'm going to go ahead and multiply it by 100 to just make it into something that's more useful and more manageable to deal with. And now we need to create some sort of logic to process this random number into an actual color value. For simplicity's sake, let's just do it like this. Let's say that if the reading is less than 30, because it will be a number from 0 to 100, we'll say that the color is blue. Then we can do the same thing for if the reading is greater than 70. And we'll say that in this case, it'll be red. And then lastly, if it's neither below 30 or above 70, then we can just say that the result is gray. And these are three colors that you might use kind of frequently when you're in robotics, just because we have the red and blue alliance, and then the mats are going to be gray. And so now all we have to do is return our resulting string and put a semicolon there. And now we can go ahead and build our program, and we should be good to go from this standpoint. Now something you might notice is that I actually could have returned the value at each of these positions. So I could have said, if the reading is less than 30, then return blue, and then the same deal with red and with gray. And while this does use a little bit less processing power and technically less memory, I prefer to return my values at the bottom and try to minimize the amount of repeating returns I have. That way it's super easy to tell what I'm returning and why. So right here, it's super easy to tell, the program flows logically. It goes top, then the next step, then the if statements and the return value. Whereas if I had a return in each step, it would be much more difficult to figure out what I'm trying to do. Anyways, with that being said, now we need to have some sort of way to check this value. So first of all, let's create a string and set it equal to the method that we just created. So I'm just going to create another string. I'll call it color reading or something like that. And then we're going to print it using the telemetry to the driver station. That way we can just see what's going on. So we'll say telemetry.addData. And we're going to say color value and then the string. And then we're going to update it. So the telemetry is a little spot underneath the driver station app, like below the play button and everything else that's useful. And you can use this to send messages to the drivers about the robot, what it's reading and stuff like that. And so it becomes pretty useful in teleop and even sometimes in autonomous if you just want to figure out exactly what your robot doing, or if you want to look at a sensor value or something like that. The last thing we need to do is I'm just going to have a sleep time for maybe 10 seconds. And that's just because if we ran the code like this without the sleep, then what would happen is the telemetry would print the value, the program would immediately end, and then the telemetry would reset to what it is normally. So if I sleep for 10 seconds, then we have time to read the value and check what it is. Alrighty, and I'm going to rebuild the code, and we can go ahead to the robot and test this out. Sorry, don't worry about that end there. Alrighty. So here's our autonomous program, and I'm just going to go ahead and initialize and play it a couple of times. We got gray, then blue, and red. And the important thing is that we're just getting values here at all. And so the point of this was just to give an example of a method that returns something. And so clearly, since we have stuff in the telemetry, we've accomplished our mission. Alrighty, so before we stop, I just wanted to address something that's kind of cool. And that's that you can actually use methods inside of other methods. Like we use this math.random method from the math package of Java, and we used it inside of our getColor method. And by now you might be realizing something really cool and kind of important. You've actually been using methods this entire time. Like this right here, wait for start, that's a method. Telemetry.update, that's a method. Sleep is a method. Even add data is a method. It's just a method with 2 parameters. Almost anything that you've been using that ends in parentheses and a semicolon is going to be a method. And that's actually really cool. And the coolest part of it all is right here, this public void run op mode that you've been writing all of your autonomous and teleop code in, that's just a method definition. It's just a method definition for the method that runs the moment you hit the start button on the app. So when you hit the start button, it's referencing your method down here that you've been writing all of your code in. This is just the special kind of method that runs when you hit that button. And that's really cool because object-oriented properties and methods are so fundamental to Java that you've been using them this entire time without even realizing it. So I just wanted to really quickly address that and tell you that before we go. Tune in next time when we cover classes and objects, and don't forget to subscribe. Thanks for watching.